Book 34 of 2020 was Neurosis and Human Growth by Karen Horney. So this book is all about neuroses and neurotic personalities. What I would kind of caveat this with to begin with is that a lot of what's discussed here is, I would say, applicable to everybody in terms of being slightly neurotic in certain ways. I don't think you can just say that this is like, if you do these things, that means that you have a neurotic personality. I think that we can all kind of be neurotic in certain ways and at certain times. So I would say that really these things apply to everybody. But then I am quite neurotic, so maybe they apply to me because of that reason and not because they apply to everybody. So essentially what Karen Horney suggests is that when you were a child, you were perhaps in a hostile environment and felt kind of isolated, and therefore you like almost developed a basic anxiety in that situation, and that to kind of allay that anxiety you respond in three ways. You kind of either cling, you rebel, or you withdraw. Now I would say that these kind of map onto attachment theory, which is where you can either be like securely attached to somebody where you're absolutely fine, no psychological problems, or you can be quite withdrawing from people, or you can be quite needy. So there's anxious attachment type and avoidant attachment type. Very interesting, you know, to read about, and they have done studies and found these things within children and you know, animals and stuff, so it's got some kind of validity to it. Essentially what Horney's describing is that this kind of inner stress that you feel, this kind of anxiety that you feel if you've had this kind of environment in childhood, creates this inner stress which is quite antithetical to human growth. So if you're in a situation where you're quite neurotic, you're actually limiting your growth as a person, and that in order to grow you need to kind of address your neuroses, which is why I think that this is something that's applicable to everyone, because I think we all have neuroses in some kind of area that when we get to about 30 we realise and try to kind of like sort them out. So because of this inner stress, it kind of, what Horney's suggesting is that it kind of alienates the individual from their real self, because what you do is you shift your energy to moulding an idealised self that is, it kind of has like an inner system of dictates that's quite rigid. So you should behave like this and you should do this, and there's no kind of like, I don't know, you're not very nice to yourself. You don't kind of have any compassion for yourself. You kind of like, this is how I should behave, this is what I should do in the situation. But it's rigid because you're an anxious person and because you have this anxiety from your early experiences. And it's not to say that there's anything necessarily very wrong about your early experiences, it's just that that's how you responded in that situation as a child. You know, you could just be a very sensitive personality, like who knows, like they haven't really done kind of like in-depth studies about, you know, why we have this kind of response to childhood, but you know, so Horney's kind of talking about the difference between a healthy want, so wanting something, and then being kind of neurotically driven to it. And this neurotic drive is not necessarily inducive, and it might even be quite destructive to your human growth. I mean, thinking of myself, like neurotic drives that I've had, when I was younger, I used to have this drive to continually improve myself in every way, and I've still kind of got it to some extent, because you know, it's a bit difficult to kind of rewrite your personality when you get to like 30. It's like 30 years of it, like it's not really that easy to dismantle it. But I was like always really kind of driven and always kind of wanting to be the best I could be in everything. And you know, I was going to university. I mean, I've got 3 degrees, for God's sake. Do you know what I mean? Like it's you get to a stage where you're like, why am I doing this? Because at no point did I enjoy like doing my degrees. Like I didn't. So why was I doing it? And as soon as I'd got them, I wasn't proud of myself and I wasn't happy about having them. Like, you know, they were a means to an end in terms of my PGCE and obviously my degree and stuff. But like I did a master's, but there was no reason to do it apart from the fact that I got it like funded and stuff. So it was just like, you know, why am I driving myself? Why am I kind of doing this? So for me, that was one of my neurotic drives. But I mean, you can criticize this because you can say, well, I mean, usually neurotic people are very successful because their drives have made them achieve things that other people can't be bothered to do. You know, like being neurotic does help sometimes. I mean, it doesn't help you personally, with relationships or people, but you know, it helps you in terms of like life and wealth and stuff, I guess you could say. So because you've got this kind of gap between your ideal self and your real self, you're not kind of like, I guess, being your true self. You're trying to make your true self into something that you think you should be, and this is where the kind of you get more anxiety, and it's kind of like self-perpetuating. So you either kind of, this kind of manifests into self-aggrandisement, where you are arrogant and you tell everyone how great you are. You know, you always find that the people that go around saying how great they are the ones that are the most neurotic, and the ones that are the most troubled, because they project out that they're so good because they don't feel it themselves. You know, the people that are really good at things, they don't go around telling everybody because they already know that they are. Like, they don't need to tell everybody. Like, you know, what would you need to tell anybody for? And then it might manifest in self-effacement, so you might kind of like put yourself down a lot, and kind of, I guess, you know, not, in actual fact, maybe I do this. This is why, you know, like when people go to interviews and they bang on about how good they are, like I really struggle with that. I really struggle with saying like, actually, I'm really good at this and I'm really skilled, because it's not something that I'm kind of used to doing. And then the other one is to be like, kind of like have resignation. I think I'm a little bit like this as well, where you just kind of give up. You're just like, oh, what's the point? Life is futile. So Horney also talks about you have a compulsive search for glory. You've got a drive towards success. So actually, this is going back to what I was giving as my example, and it feels futile, which it always did to me. And you know, another way that people might respond if they're neurotic is that they will switch aims frequently to kind of almost avoid the realisation that it's a phantom, and that you are driving to success because you're avoiding the sense of inferiority that you perhaps felt when you were a child, or that you still feel as an adult. I mean, I'm a little bit iffy about that one, because I don't think I feel inferior to anybody. I've never really felt like that. I've never looked at someone and gone, oh, I'm inferior to them. Like, you know, when people get intimidated by people, that's never happened to me. Like, I mean, maybe like when a person's like really clever and like really kind of articulate and really nice and like knows about life and stuff, which there's not many of those people around. Like, so, you know, I don't have a sense of inferiority, but then maybe that's me being kind of self-aggrandising, who knows. So this is the thing as well, like, because Horney describes so many like different variations of what a neurotic person might be, she's literally describing everybody. Like, I don't think there's anybody that these things won't cover. So it's a little bit, in that sense, lacking scientifically. I don't know what am I even trying to say? Lacking scientificness. Lacking science. It's not very scientific. That's the thing what I'm trying to say. So, for that reason, it's a little bit like, you know, you can take these things on board, but it's a little bit like reading your horoscope and thinking that they apply to you. Like, what's that? There's a theory called something, like when you read something you think it's you, when you read all that kind of personality quizzes and whatever. It might be a little bit of this when you're listening to this, because I was like, oh my god, this is me. I'm so neurotic. Then Horney gives some examples. So in fact, no, I am not self-effacing, I've just realised. So a self-effacing neurotic is somebody who compulsively aims to be good and appeasing to other people. This is definitely not me. And I know quite a lot of people that are like this, where they don't say like what they truly think and what they truly feel about something, because they don't want to upset anybody else. And these people are really frustrating to be around and to be colleagues with or friends with, because they never tell you what they want, and then they complain that they don't get what they want. And you're like, well, if you just told me like what you thought about something, or what your opinion was, or whatever, your needs would be met. Like, you'd be happier. Like, you know, I mean, people don't like you when you say what you want, because it causes group tension and group conflict, because you can't possibly meet everyone's needs. So if people don't speak up, it makes a group more cohesive. But you end up with people that aren't happy. So you've got to have some balance. And so to be kind of good and appeasing, I mean, I'm a little bit like resistance to people that are always really good, because it's not a realistic way of being in terms of being a human being. Not everybody's good like that. Like, it's not possible to be good all the time. You're a human being, and we have the dark side of our nature, and so those people are very kind of repressed, and they will explode at some point. So I tend to avoid people like that. But then again, maybe that's just the neurosis of mine. The resigned types, this is definitely me. the resigned neurotic is quite aloof and withdraws from others. So whenever I'm really anxious about things, or like I'm a little bit like, I guess, like uncomfortable, I will withdraw from people. So I'm not one of those people that will seek out other people when I'm upset. Like I withdraw and I go into my shell. So it's very difficult for me to kind of connect to people when I'm not feeling great. So that's a neurotic trait that I definitely have. So because she's talking about all these things and I'm relating to that as she's kind of talking about it, I think it must have some validity because she's describing me. But like, oh, that's, I just remember it's called the Burnham effect, I think it's called, where you think it's you. And I'm very susceptible to that, so that it could be that. This could all be like a lot of rubbish. She talks as well about neurotics, or types of neurotics, having like a compulsion for vindictive triumph. So you're almost kind of like, in your adult life, you're seeking revenge for the hurtful experiences that you suffered in childhood. I don't know if I'm doing this, I don't think I am, but because I'm always like really confused by people who are vindictive. But you know, I've experienced a lot of people that are very vindictive and want to hurt others, because it, if you think about it, if you exert power over someone, or you know, affect somebody in some way, it does unconsciously give you that sense of superiority over them. So you would kind of do it, wouldn't you? You know, I know quite a few people that do that regularly, so it is a thing that people do, whether it's for that reason or not. You know, this is just one explanation, isn't it? But it is something that happens. So this is kind of Horney's interpretation of it. Horney also talks about how neurotics, I mean, I'm saying neurotics, these, like I said before, this is just if you are behaving in a neurotic way, I would say, but she calls them neurotics. But I think it's everybody. I think we're all capable of behaving in a neurotic way. That people who are neurotic suffer entitlement. So it's almost like people who are neurotic expect understanding from others, but they don't put the effort in to understand other people. This isn't me, because I mean, I do expect understanding, but I'm quite empathetic and I do understand others really easily, so this bit doesn't apply to me. But one thing actually that does apply to me is that there's an expectation that people won't be critical of you, because, you know, people should be nice. But then I have actually been critical and not nice about other people. I mean, not to their face, because I'm not horrible, but you know, I have said things about people that, particularly when I was younger, that I probably shouldn't have said, but then I expect people not to talk about me. So it's kind of like, it's silly, isn't it? Like, why would you expect people not to talk about you when you talk about other people? But then, having said that, like, I very rarely talk about other people, because I've got better things to be doing with my time and thinking about. Like, you know, if someone's not in front of me, like, there's no need to talk about them, is there? So, you know, some of these things might apply, and then some of them kind of are a bit like, maybe they don't. Oh, and the other thing is that, like, there's an expectation, another thing of self-entitlement is that other people should contact you and see how you are, but you never contact other people and see how they are. So you can't really expect it, because you don't do it to other people, so why would they do it to you? So it's almost like looking at, you know, if you feel like, oh, that person doesn't make any effort with me or whatever, you need to look at your own behaviour and think, well, do I make effort with them? Like, because if you don't, then that's the reason. Like, you know, if somebody never contacts you, and you think, oh, like, why are they not contacting me? Like, think about, have you contacted them? Like, because if you haven't, then that's the reason why. So stop being neurotic about it. Like, one that definitely applies to me is that people who are neurotic are indignant of social rules that apply to them. So they don't want to follow social rules, but in order to be loved by someone, you have to follow social rules. So I really relate to this one, because I'm really frustrated that I have to behave in a certain way for people to like me, because I'm like, they should like me anyway, they should like me for who I am. But then it's like, you can't just say what you think to people, because people have feelings and they will get offended, and, you know, people aren't very laid back, and, you know, they're uptight, and they think that what you said's horrible or whatever. And, you know, and I've been the one that's been uptight and thought that about other people. So it's like, you can't just say what you want. You have to be nice to people, you have to be respectful to people, you have to minimize what you really think about things. And, you know, I'm always like very oh, I don't like that if it's true. But actually, if there's a lot of things that I don't like, I come across as a really negative person, but it's just because the things that we're talking about are things that I don't like. If we were talking about things that I liked, I'd be very positive and I'd be very, open to things. But if you only talk about if you only talk about things to a person that they don't like, well, then they're going to come across negative. Do you know what I mean? So, but having said that, like, if you're in a social situation, and it's funny actually, because I joined a book club about 2 years ago, and I realised that a lot of the books that they pick I don't like. Fair enough, like, we've all got different tastes. And I was telling, I was being very open and telling them exactly what I thought about it. But I realised from their responses and from how they were treating me that actually, to be quite negative about something quite frequently, people don't like you. Like, they don't. So you have to kind of like change the way that you speak about things to not come across as negative and a not nice person, which is unfortunate because you'd think that those people would give you the time of day to get to know you and realise that you're not like that. But that's just, people don't do that. They just judge you on a snap judgment, and that's kind of the way it is. They don't realise that maybe the way that you're talking is because of the way that you've been brought up and your childhood experiences and all the rest of it. But, there we go. Horney also talks about special claims. So you might have people in your life that make demands of you based on their relationship with you. And I've had this before, like from parents and from, people that I've been in a relationship with, because because they're my boyfriend, I should be doing this or I should be doing that. And it's never been like, so neurotic people make those demands on people. So they think that because they have that relationship with you that they should make that demand on you. And friends do this as well. Like, friends think, well, because you're really good friends, that means that you should do this and you should do that. And actually, no, like, you shouldn't. Like, that's a neurotic thing to kind of think like that. Horney talks about as a neurotic person, you suffer internal demands that are very unrealistic, and that you if you experience kind of non-fulfilment, you will have violent emotional responses to that. So you might become very aggressive, or very emotional and crying all the time or whatever. And you might also externalize that to other people. So that could happen. People that are neurotic generally are hypersensitive to flaws and to rejection from other people, easily hurt, need affirmation, generally because they lack self-confidence. I think around this point I was a little bit like iffy, because I've never needed affirmations, because I was reading off that board, and I don't lack self-confidence. But then, is that a defense mechanism? You could meta-analyze this, couldn't you, really? A compulsion to compare, again, that's not really something that I would do, but she talks about kind of like neurotic pride, and how if you've got a neurotic pride, you don't really appreciate the assets that you have as a person, because when you compare yourself to somebody else, you're always going to be in a situation of lack, because you're comparing to them as a person, and you might have a quality that they don't have, but you don't really compare against that, because you don't think to compare against that because they don't have that. So that's going to make you feel inferior. They also talk about how if you've got kind of perfectionist shoulds about how you should be behaving, that you'll also experience stage fright. It's definitely the case with me. Like, I get performance anxiety all the time, even in like groups of people. Of like, if I'm in a group of people of more than about 4, I feel like anxious. And it's weird actually, because it's got worse as I've got older. So it was weird. Like, I suffered it when I was younger, and then when I became a teacher, it completely went. I was completely confident for years, felt great, and then it kind of came back again, and I was like, oh, this is not good. Like, I thought I'd got rid of this, but obviously I must be unconsciously putting more pressure on myself, or something that's made it come back. Because like I said, I've got social anxiety now, and I've never had social anxiety like that before. It's weird, very strange. And also another thing that neurotics do is, which I definitely did when I was younger, is that you settle for relationships with people just because they want to date you, because you don't want to suffer the rejection of dating somebody that you actually like, because you just don't want to put yourself out there for that. So I never told anybody that I liked them when I did, and kind of just went out with the people that wanted to date me. and they were obviously not right for me, you know. I don't do that anymore. I've learned from that. But I don't really put myself out there, which is why I'm still single at 32. But yeah, so this was like a really insightful audiobook discussion, because yeah, I'm neurotic basically. Not as bad as I used to be, but still got neuroses, still got things that I kind of need to work on. But like I said, like, I don't think there's anybody that can honestly say that some of these things don't apply to them, like, or at least apply to them when they were younger. Like, I mean, there must be lots of people that are like this, because I have observed people in my environment that have these traits and have been like this. Not in, you know, obviously this isn't just like everybody, like I've gone through that, and I've been open with comparing myself to kind of give you some insight into how it has some applicability and validity. It's not like that everything's applicable to everyone, but like I mentioned before, it might just be the fact that it's that Burnham effect where you read it and you think it's you, like when you Google symptoms and you think you're dying. So it does lack a little bit of believability in that sense. I think it's quite dated as well. I wonder what it would be like if it was kind of updated to like include more modern things, modern research. So because again, it's not backed up with research or anything like that. It's just kind of a discussion about it. So it's very kind of like qualitative rather than kind of research driven, and it is quite lengthy in the way that it's discussed. I think it could have been made a lot more concise. You know, it's not an academic book, it's more of like a therapy book. So I thought it was very interesting and insightful. I mean, to be honest with you, like, I'm pretty aware of these things. Like I do know these things about myself. I'm very self-aware. Like, you know, I know I'm a knobhead, like I already know. But it but it was interesting to hear it back, because I was like, yeah, like reminding myself of all the things that I kind of need to work on. So yeah, it was interesting for that reason, and I would recommend it. I would definitely recommend it, particularly if you are quite neurotic, because it might make you feel better as well. There's a lot of other people that are also neurotic. They just hide it very well. I hide mine very, very well. She says, and everyone probably already knows. So yeah, I gave it 2 stars, but I think it's because it was just lengthy. It was like, you know, could have been made more concise and stuff, and I did know a lot of it already. I know a lot about this stuff about myself anyway. But if you don't, I think you probably enjoy it more than I did.